message in there was
Oh, yeah, you really.
so true. And we
I
forget.
see a lot of things I don't say.
And we
We all
forget.
have stuff. Everybody does.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good, how are you?
Good. My name's Dan.
I'm Amy,
Amy, nice to meet you.
With all of our students.
Well, over here. I got a couple minutes.
Yeah, it's
No
almost
sense rushing
10.
these things,
All right.
It's almost 10.
Try until you know.
Yeah, that's right.
Is everything good with Jack? Does anyone know? Of course, he
I
misses.
saw Jack over the holidays. It was
Okay,
fine.
good.
Okay.
Something around?
Yeah.
He looks good.
It's amazing. He's just amazing to me. It's like to be that up in age and look that good and get up after surgery and walk around.
I know.
It's amazing.
Oh.
You've been to the Purple Rose Theater? In
Chelsea? No, I haven't, but I was
You know,
wondering.
I have.
it's theater around.
What did you
I
see?
have. I like it.
Sherlock Holmes and something.
Was it any good?
Yeah, it was good.
I saw the one the end of last season. It was outstanding. It was so good, especially for somebody our age.
But she makes this announcement. You know how small it is, right?
Right.
So as you're going in, and this she's what, the manager of the day or whatever. Very, very strong, loud voice. Turn off your cell phone. Turn off the cell phone.
I thought I just did that, but I'm checking again.
3 times
Yep, and then
during
something
that
goes off.
show.
Keep the cell phones on.
Yeah,
Yep.
and one of them,
Always.
I guess the story was, her husband's very ill or something, and she gets up going up, she's on the phone, and she, what in the world, why are you here if your husband is
Well,
so
put it,
ill?
you can also put it on vibrate and hold it or put it in your pocket so that
That's
you
the
hear
other-
it, you walk out.
And there was
Right.
another one that goes off. And then right behind me,
I hear the voice.
we hear the voice.
Is that? Oh, you're impressed that I can speak? Is that?
Oh, we hear hello.
So you didn't have to either put one in or be able to use that.
Not sure how to take that.
Well, it was a positive. Yeah, it was a compliment. It was a positive.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's me. I'm being oversensitive. It's high holidays. You're like, you have a voice? Took it the wrong way. You know, cantors, we have our foibles. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Thank God. Thank God. Good to have you. Here, why don't you pass these around? I'm going to grab one who needs.
This is 19.
Chapter 19. Chapter 19.
Before you get started.
So, Candor, they just asked me to go do a thing, so I'll be back.
Okay, we're
Yeah,
here.
you're streaming that.
Awesome.
You mentioned the word echad last week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the aleph was for one, and
Chet.
the ket was for 8.
Yeah.
You said the 7 heavens.
And the earth.
What are the 7 heavens?
He goes through some of them in like one of the later chapters, one of the letters, and one of them is where manna is ground for the righteous, and one of them is like where the heavenly Jerusalem is. I mean, there's descriptions of them in Kabbalah. I haven't really gone deeply into them. I don't have them memorized. No. We deal with mainly the levels of the soul, and we leave heaven for someone else to add up.
I had never heard that term before, the seven heavens.
Yeah, if you want, I can look up where in the Tanya he describes some of them, not all of them. And I'm sure there's in places it's described in alarming detail, what each of the seven heavens is and what they are. I'm not sure for us, for our purposes, to like learn how to be, a more mature soul flowing through a body, that knowing about the levels of heavens is the most important thing. But I mean,
I guess I'd never heard that term before.
oh yeah, no, I think almost anything you could imagine having to do with spirituality, there's very extensive descriptions of in Kabbalistic writings, including different levels of heaven.
And then the Dalet was for the four directions.
Yeah. So where I'm going, whatever I'm looking at. Yeah. How's everybody? So we have, I think I gave a Yom Kippur spiel last year when we started, but I think it's kind of bears worth repeating. We have Yom Kippur coming up. How you doing? You need a text? Here you go. Like your hat. So Yom Kippur is a time when whatever we're working on, whether we're working on integrating our divine soul with our animal soul, as we've been describing for the past year, or trying to harness the pintele yid, the core of our soul, as we're learning now in this meditation technique. Yom Kippur is a very powerful time for that. And it's worth knowing some of the different practices involved and maybe touching on how they apply Kabbalistically. So we're probably all familiar with fasting, right? Then on Yom Kippur, it's a day-long fast. And I think it's pretty clear for us looking at my animal soul and my divine soul, my self-centered soul and my other-centered soul, that few things are as helpful as a fast in switching off the, so to speak, momentum of the animal soul and the control of the animal soul. Even eating normal food, and nothing wrong with that. We're helping ourselves survive and be good people. But it's a pleasure, right? And it's a habit. And taking 24 or 25 or 26 even hours to just say, pause on that, and I'm going to let my divine soul do divine soul kind of things. That's a very powerful way of keeping the flow of the animal soul in check. So just that alone is an amazing thing. And as well, the last hour of Yom Kippur, the Ne'ilah service, is said to be in particular a key time to ignite the highest level of the soul, what's called the Yechida. We haven't learned much about it, but it connects in many ways to what we're learning in this meditation system, the long short path that we're learning, which is that there's a spark of Chokhmah, which is within the core or the root, or the essence of the intellect of our soul, and when that then ignites, that is absolute nullification before the infinite. That's really what's at the core. That's what happens before our intellectual apprehension begins, right? So if we want to ignite that last hour of Yom Kippur, the Ne'ilah service, is actually, that service corresponds to the Yechida in our soul, and it's a great way to ignite that. And just a little talk about the fast. I know in many Reformed temples, ours included, the times of the fast are linked to the times of the service. So if I go to a 9 o'clock service, say, for Kol Nidre, I might have a 7 o'clock dinner and then come to services, and then at the end of the day, the next day, we finish services, and for good reasons, which I would never argue with as a Reformed cantor. People are leaving and we'll hand out bread and water because many people don't live in walking distance here, and most people are driving, and you don't want to be driving while you're fasting. So that's the practice, and I think that's really appropriate as a Reformed synagogue. Would never argue with it. However, if we're looking from a Kabbalistic perspective, every major Kabbalist, from the Arizal to the Alter Rebbe, everyone that you would ever study, describes to us their perception, their very refined spiritual perception, that the flow of spiritual energies that's happening, that we're trying to harness to get our souls to flow with, actually does correspond to sunset and then nightfall. That those aren't just arbitrary times. There's a flow of energy that begins and ends, that comes down and comes back up. Each section of the day has its own quality and flow of energy as well. So as people learning Kabbalistic and Hasidic text, it is an option as Reformed Jews to play around with or decide myself to try personally, actually fasting with the times of the day. And this is actually not a bad year to try it if anyone wants to try it, because it's late in the year, so break fast is actually much earlier than normal, right? If you were to be, like I personally do the fast from the halachic times of sunset and nightfall. Most times, by the time I'm eating, everybody's practically asleep. But this year it's quite early, so if you wanted to try it, anyone who's here or watching, it's actually not a hard year to do it. And the times are in West Bloomfield. They'll be different elsewhere depending where you are. But here, so 6:45 is when the fast begins according to the movements of the sun. And then the next day, 7:43 is when it ends. 7:43. So 6:45, one could have dinner at 6 and finish by 6:30, and that's sort of a normal thing to do. And if other people are now snacking after that, I don't have to. Like that seems like it could flow. After tends to be a little awkward. But 7:43, our service finishes at 6:15. You probably get to the parking lot at about 6:45, right? And then with the traffic and the construction, you probably don't get home till like 7:15 anyways. So another half hour if you put out hors d'oeuvres and let people who have already broken their fast, let them schmooze and eat a little. And then if you wait till 7:45 to serve the main course and I sit down and eat that, I think it's a year when if anyone wanted to try, it's actually, it kind of flows with our community, and you're not really going to be, rowing against the stream, as it were. And also, when you're in a traditional community, as you can imagine, it's much easier. Everyone's fasting. The service goes till 8:15 anyways, because they do the evening service after, and you just go with the flow. And you're hungry, so what, right? It's not that hard. It's hard for some people, but it's easier. For us in particular, if we really make the effort to try this as a personal spiritual practice, especially when it's tricky and we have to be careful of the people around us and not to have them feel like it has to do with them or I'm judging them, or not to stress them out, or not to, do it in a way that really makes people feel happy, especially because it's not our custom. We say there's great spiritual added value to that, right? For someone to fast when it's their custom, done it for a long time, that's great. But for one of us to take this on when it's not necessarily our custom to do it with those times, and especially when you have to kind of engage people around you in a kind and thoughtful way, that really, if you're looking at our first system of meditation, of elevating the world through our Jewish practices, that's an amazing, amazing thing. So just a beautiful opportunity that's there. And that aside, a lot of people kind of leave a little money on the table when it comes to Yom Kippur, because the fast isn't the whole thing. There's also 4 other practices that are involved in the restrictions of Yom Kippur that maybe not as important as the fasts, but they have their own independent value, regardless of what my times of fasting or my fast practice is, right? So even if I'm doing, maybe a half-day fast because that's my practice, adding one of these other ones is going to have its own independent value, unaffected by anything else. And those are, who can name them? Anybody? No leather shoes. You can wear a belt. You can wear leather. So one at a time. So no leather. Sorry, yeah, okay. No, perfumes, ointments, anything like gels, all that stuff. Nothing like that. Yeah, 2 more. Pardon me? White is a tradition. It's a minhag to wear white, and there's something called the kittel, but that's not one of the restrictions. Yeah. No sex. Right. So no hoochie coochie. And also, by the way, no really affectionate greetings, right? Like the big hugs and how are you and oh my gosh, or coming home to your partner and giving them a nice big hug. Even that stuff is actually avoided for various reasons. And the last one.
No scotch and soda.
No scotch and soda, that's true. No washing. So you don't wake up in the morning and take a nice shower and Of course, you wash your hands if you've gone to the bathroom or if they get soiled by something, if you're handling food, other situations. So, we don't push to that extreme, but general, normal rinsing, washing, showering, bathing, you don't do. So let's go through those quickly. I think of those, the one that's the easiest to do that many people don't think about, if you want to add one thing, these days buying a nice pair of non-leather shoes is stylish and comfortable and adds to your wardrobe, and there's lots of great options for nice, dark non-leather shoes that
Wear a leather belt.
yeah, it's only shoes. It's only shoes. It's only shoes, yeah, because leather shoes are considered comfortable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but today you don't have to show up in like wooden clogs or your old flip-flops from the 60s, right? You can get a nice pair of shoes that matches your outfit, and that's it. Like, it's done, right? I mean, fasting is like a whole day of like stopping your instincts and not eating and doing without. This is like put on a different pair of shoes and check, right? I've done something amazing. That's pretty easy.
You could wear a leather belt,
Yes, it's only shoes. It's only shoes. Yeah.
so I shouldn't be surprised after Yom Kippur when I leave to see a sign, not for Kabbalists.
Not for. I don't know. I would never put that sign up. I think it's very much for Kabbalists. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and then so the other ones, you can imagine just kind of putting on deodorant or whatever before the day begins, and just letting that do what it does for the period. If you're not eating, generally your breath is bad enough that maybe just adds a little to it, and add to that not hugging. If you got the breath and then now the body odor going, then who wants to hug you anyways, right? But if you just let people around you know that this is a practice I'm trying out, one or two of these, so they can expect it, it's not a surprise, and why you're doing it, because you want to ignite the parts of your soul that connect with them, that serve them, that help you be a better person. Usually, once people understand it, then they're happy to kind of go along with your new shtick, or whatever it may be. So, just putting that out there, Yom Kippur's coming. If you'd like to try the fast, those are the times, starting at 6:45, ending at 7:43. So I think 6:45 until 6:45, and it's an amazing thing.
So I just want to say that for me personally, learning all this just changes my understanding of the holidays so much in every way.
Yeah,
And I want to thank you for everything you've done to teach us,
a pleasure. Yeah,
take us down this path. But it's just, we grow up our whole lives, with the high holy days, and that's what it is. But now there's so much more, and the understanding and the depth, and
yeah. I think it's a beautiful thing for Reformed Jews to get tools from anywhere in Judaism that add to the meaning of the depth is a beautiful thing. I'm glad if that's the case. Same for me.
good. I need a chapter 19, please.
There you go. So I think we're at 3rd of Shvat. Is that where we got to?
Yeah.
It's 269. If you're in this book, so page 269. Have you had a chance to watch any of the videos? So you're just joining us now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Welcome.
Oh,
After
welcome.
last night.
Beautiful. Okay, excellent. So we're sort of, we've just started, we're in chapter 2 of a new type of meditation. We learned the first type of meditation, which was intellectual focus meditation to generate.
Watch them still.
They're all up. It's all in, yeah. And if connect after class, I'll show you one in particular that sums up the first 8 chapters, which is kind of the lexicon, all the information you'll need. And then there was one meditation system which we just learned called the long short path, which was intellectually driven. And now we're learning a second system, which is actually called the short long path, which is a whole other thing. Right? So can we sum up what we learned so far about the short long path? What is it? What isn't it? No. Everybody's averting their eyes. What have we learned so far? What kind of love we're using? Are we generating these tefuna emotions that we did like in the first? These like subtle, hidden love, right? Which,
And every Jew is born with it.
and if you could remember ahava mesuteret,
Speak up.
No, I got CRS.
if you could remember ahava mesuteret, then you get like a ooh from the class next time, right? So we have this hidden love that we're using, and this hidden love, is it just special people that have it? Who has it?
All of them.
Everybody. But hold on, what if I don't believe in God? Do I still have it? Surely not. Why is that?
We're all one. We're all the Israeli people.
Okay, we're all one, yeah, but there's something more technical. We're all born with that spark, yes, but why? Because it's where? In the heart? Is that what we talked about? Remember that chokhmah business? What's chokhmah? Intellect, right? And not just any part of the intellect. There's chokhmah being in dat in Kabbalah. So it's not in dat. It's not what I connect to intellectually. It's not even in bina, what I can comprehend intellectually. It's in chokhmah, the first spark that I don't comprehend, right? The first kernel of intellect that comes before understanding. That's where Kabbalah says, me, I come from. But it's not even me yet because I don't understand it. So hidden in that chokhmah, that's where the light of the infinite, the light of the Ein Sof, actually flows into my consciousness. That is where my soul begins. And so because it's above anything I can understand, it's above intellect, it's above even my awareness, it can't be touched by any of my conscious philosophical stances or beliefs or experiences or anything, right? So no matter what, this is an inheritance. We say it comes from Abraham and Sarah and all our patriarchs and matriarchs, and it is 100% in every Jewish person, except that, like, if I have an old friend who I haven't seen in 20 years, I may not have thought of them in a decade, but I have this love for them that if I were to encounter them suddenly, oh my gosh, right, it's so good to see you, amazing, remember this, remember that, and suddenly this love comes from somewhere, right, that I wasn't thinking about, wasn't conscious of, never popped into my awareness for even maybe a decade, right? But it's still there. So we have this dormant love like that, but it's a love for the Ein Sof, in a sense that we are all nullified in the Ein Sof, and that's all we are. So unlike the first system we've learned, where we're generating emotions that may be subtle, but still are effective in elevating our share of the world, this one, there's nothing subtle about it. When it hits, it's so strong that, as we'll learn, it can actually cause someone to sacrifice their life rather than deny it. That's how powerful it is. So this is just a huge sort of a hidden engine in our consciousness. Yeah, and then we looked at the idea of the flame, and that the soul of man is the candle of God, the soul of a human is the candle of God, and that the thing it likes to do is to always leap upwards, as if it's trying to leave the wick and reunite with its source in the heavens, or whatever you want to call it. And the soul is like that too. That spark of chokhmah, which is the by definition the hidden love within us, the connection to the Ein Sof, all it really wants is to reunite with the Ein Sof, even though that would mean that it didn't exist anymore, that its existence would be nullified, as if the flame of a candle were now moved into the sphere of the sun, right? If that was possible, there'd still be no candle flame anymore. That candle flame would be gone, would have no identity, no contribution, no existence, it's just sun. So that's what the essence of that spark is in Chokhmah, of our divine soul, that it wants to reunite. It flickers upwards like that flame, and we can actually learn to use it, as we will in the next chapters, to generate a much higher functioning state when it comes to our interactions with people in the world around us. So we're at third of Shvat, 269. V'zehu klal b'chol sitra di kedusha she'eno ela ma shenimshach mechochma shenikra kodem ha'alyon, kodesh ha'alyon. Go ahead. Now this.
Now, this is a general principle in the whole realm of holiness. Holiness,
Kedusha,
is only that which derives from Chokmah, called
Kodesh Ha'elyon.
Harim?
Kodesh Ha'elyon.
Supernal holiness.
The word Kodesh,
The word Kodesh refers to Chokmah,
while Kedusha
Kedusha refers to any manifestation of holiness is derived from Chokmah. As Chokmah represents nullification of self before God, only those matters that manifest this character of Chokmah may be said to possess holiness. Those matters in which the characteristic is lacking lack holiness as well. The Alter Rebbe continues speaking of Chokmah.
An interesting point for those that like the language, the difference between Kedusha and Kodesh, right? Holiness versus just holy, right? If something is Kodesh, that means that's Chokhmah. for my consciousness, something that's kodesh means it is chokhmah. It is completely nullified to the Ein Sof. It has no independent existence. If something has kedusha, holiness, that means it's connected to kodesh. It's connected to that sense of chokhmah, and that chokhmah is infusing it, but it's not holy. It's not holy, right? I mean, it's hard to say in English, right? It's not kodesh. It's not the actual chokhmah itself. It's the chokhmah flowing in. So I might have a conscious thought that I've worked out, that I understand. Oh, I want to learn more about this. I want to try not wearing leather shoes on Yom Kippur. And that's a conscious thought that I can take and manipulate and understand. So that's not kodesh itself, but because it's infused with chokhmah, it has kedusha. It has holiness. So we can actually have thoughts in our own mind and then emotions about those thoughts as well that are chokhmah infused, are connected to my own flow of chokhmah, and that's kedusha. But that's not kodesh. Kodesh is just chokhmah itself, and kodesh is always outside of our understanding. And you have these two aspects that we're always relating to. And kodesh habatel b'mtsiut be'or ein sof baruch hu hamlubash bo ve'eno davar bifnei atzmo kanizkar la'el.
Its very existence is nullified in the light of the blessed Ein Sof, which is clothed in it, and it is not a thing apart, as explained earlier. Therefore,
Yeah. So, and in fact, I mean, you can use this for kodesh or for kedusha, right? So when I look at a Torah scroll, I'm not saying that's kodesh. I'm not on Mount Sinai and God has appeared. Right? However, it's kedusha. It's holiness, and something in me knows that scroll. Its only existence is to transmit the information that came down through the Jewish lineage, including the hidden kabbalistic knowledge, and transmit that to everyone around it. Right? And so I look at it, and although I see a physical Torah scroll, really that's transparent. I'm really looking at kedusha that's flowing from kodesh itself. Right? It's transparent. It's nullified. It has no other reason. Right? So that sense of chokhmah can also flow within me. When I start to reorient my animal soul, the animal instincts that drive my physical needs, and orient them to helping people around me and being a better person, refining myself and elevating my share of the world, now I can be more and more like that Torah scroll. I can take my conscious elements and infuse them with a sense of that spark of chokhmah, and now that kedusha can be inside me, and I can actually also engage those parts of the world that are around me with that same sense. Yeah? Make sense? Sorry, got quiet.
Well, I mean, because you have to deal with the idea, like you say, that it's transparent. You're seeing, it's the physical, but you're looking through that and getting the spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole idea of what we're trying to do.
Is there a question on that? Does that need more?
Guess not.
Okay. We'll go on. V'lechen nikra koach ma.
Therefore, this faculty is called chokhmah, which consists of two words.
Koach ma.
Koach and ma, the power of humility and abnegation.
Abnegation, right? So abnegation means putting myself aside, deleting myself, nullifying myself, right? Self-abnegation.
The word ma means what? Denotes immateriality, as one might say when belittling himself. What am I? Thus, holiness refers to anything which, like chokhmah, draws down from God and nullifies itself.
As we've looked at this, chokhmah relates to the two words koach ma, the power of what? And when I say what does it imply? If I say, what is that? It means that, what do I know about the thing? Garnish, nothing. Right? If I say, what are we going to do? Right? It means I don't see a solution, right? So what implies nothingness, implies no understanding, implies just complete emptiness. So the power of ma, koach ma, means looking at myself past my emotions, of course past my physical being, past my emotions, past even my conscious intellect, to that point where I begin, where it's just emptiness, right? If you've ever done meditation, whether in Eastern traditions like yoga or Buddhism, you're always gazing within, as it were, gazing at something to the point where you reach this empty boundary, call it, and then you keep gazing at that, and then different spiritual things happen. You realize that your perceptions were something of a distortion, and on it goes. So that, in Judaism, we call that chokhmah. That's the point within myself where that's it. That's the top of me or the end of me. Beyond that, there's nothing. And that's where the power of the power of, okay, so what am I, or what's the solution, or what's the reality here? That allows the light of the Ein Sof to actually enter in, because there's nothing there. I'm not even there. If I can look at that point where I'm not there anymore, that's where I can interface with the infinite. And this little spark of Chokhmah can make its way into my consciousness, and then Bina will take it, and as we've learned, Bina will open up that point of Chokhmah and find the details in it in an intellectual way. But the Chokhmah wasn't comprehensible itself. That's that power of the Chokhmah. We're going to skip the next page. We sometimes encounter these sections that maybe seemed quite normal in the 18th century. He kind of reframes something that we spoke about at length at the end of chapter 1, that really it's a particularly, at this refined level, it's considered a particularly unique characteristic of a Jewish soul to be completely altruistic with no even subtle exceptions. But most Jews can't accomplish that, and many non-Jews are righteous and able to be, functioning in incredible, beautiful ways. Between the high holidays, I'm not in the mood to revisit it. But if you like to read it, you can. But the point is that Chokhmah is our source of life. The point he's making is that just like breath and food is my source of life physically, Chokhmah, that point in my soul where any intellectual spark begins and becomes emotion and then action or speech or conscious thought, that is actually my spiritual source of life. And if I shut that off, and if I don't allow that to infuse the rest of my consciousness, it's something like spiritual death, right? A person that lives their whole life trying to help everyone around them and be the best person and serve the world, we know there's like a certain spiritual life to them. If you ever encountered anyone in any tradition, my wife loves this hugging guru. What's her name? You ever know her name? The hugging.
What's her name?
You know her name.
What's her name?
She does these hugging tours. I forget her name.
Trees.
No, people.
Oh, okay.
She'll hug people for like 30 hours straight with no breaks. It's
Wow.
crazy, right?
Wow.
Everybody gets this, and
why
you're
you
like,
like
oh
such a
my
good
God,
hugger."
yeah. So some of that, or people that live like that, we know there's a vitality to them. There's a certain inner strength and life. There's a something when you're around them. You feel more alive. You know what I mean? So that's the Jewish description of that. Chokhmah is where I get my spiritual life from. And if I do the opposite and I say, that's it, I'm in it for number one, and I'm going to think about everything from my own perspective, I'm not going to deeply consider my children, my family, my friends, my community, that's like cutting myself off from my spiritual source of life. And I may still physically continue to live a long, happy life, but inside that something, that magnetic life force, I don't know what you call it, it's now stopped flowing. And we say that person, from a kabbalistic perspective, can even become quote-unquote dead. They can still be functioning physically, they can still have intellect and emotions, but it's only their animal soul that's flowing, right? Even when I do something for someone else, I'm going to give them $1,000 because I want to feel so good about myself and I can't stand to see them suffering. Even if I do something like that, it's always for my own pleasure. It's never just for them because it has to be done. So we say that's our source of life, and that's the point he's making.
The next paragraph is interesting.
Oh yeah, but we're going to skip that. I've gone over. You can look at the end of chapter 1 on the videos. We spent half an hour on it. I mean, there's so when the brain malfunctions, there we want to turn to professionals, mental health professionals, and even medicines that are available, because just like if I break my arm, it's in a cast, I can't put on tefillin, right? If I you name it, right? If I had my wisdom teeth removed, I probably can't eat matzah that year, right? So just sometimes the physical body gets in the way, and that's the physical brain getting in the way of the flow. And there, you really want to have the person, seek appropriate medical help, because if you're clinically depressed, then you don't want to just approach it spiritually. You want to really treat the physical organ of the brain. Yeah, and label things. And Label, is a great example of that he's a trained psychologist. My teacher, Label Wolf from Australia, he's a trained psychologist and also teaches this tradition of Kabbalah. And he often will say that, once you're dealing with someone that is clinically depressed or clinically you name it, now you need to turn to medical professionals like you would for any illness. Top of 271. V'chein harshim ufoshe Israel kodem sheba'u l'idei nisayon l'kadesh Hashem.
Just as the heathen nations are called dead, so too are the wicked and the sinners of Israel, but only before they are put to the test of sanctifying God's name.
So talking about us, about the Jewish people, there's two categories here. There's Rishaim, so for anyone who hasn't read the Tanya, you hear Rasha and you think of Haman or Hitler, a sinister, diabolical person. But for those of us who have been learning, who is a Rasha in this tradition? Who is the Alter Rebbe call a Rasha? What defines a Rasha?
Someone that's not abandoning.
So, okay,
We're all kind of
yeah,
Rashas,
that's
so-
not abandoning. So what makes them not abandoning? What act might make someone not abandoning? Do I have to stab someone in the back or steal someone's car?
No, you're just fighting with your animal soul.
Soul is in control.
Like, for instance, doing what?
For instance, eating pie.
Pardon me?
Eating
Eating
pie.
pie.
Or yourself with pie or something.
Yeah, so eating a normal meal, but not doing it because I want to take that food and do good things in the world, but just because it tastes good. So nothing immoral about it, nothing even halakhically wrong with it. I might be a traditional Jew eating a perfectly kosher pie with a blessing and etc. But if I've done it just because it tastes good and that's why I ate it, and I didn't think about how I'm going to use that pie to now, clothe the needy, now the Alter Rebbe calls that person a Rasha. Why? An incomplete Rasha, but a Rasha. Why? Because they allowed their animal soul to drive the car of their being. Right? We have two souls, one that's interested in this, and another that's interested in that. And the person who 24/7, every thought, speech, and action is about the world around me and helping the world around me, that's the only person that's not a Rasha in this book. And if for 10 minutes a year I do something just for me with no ulterior external motive to help someone else, now I'm in the category of Rasha. So that's basically everybody, right? Almost all Jews except really, really intensely other-centered people who are doing deep practices and perhaps were born with a particularly altruistic personality, right? So when he says Rasha, he basically means every normal person that has kind of a balance of sometimes I'm thinking about other people, sometimes I'm thinking about me, and it's a mix. That's what we're calling a Rasha. But then the sinners of Israel, Poshe Israel, that's a lower status. That's someone that actually does, averas. I might have spoken a negative tale about someone once, something horrible like that, or maybe cheated on my taxes a little. I don't know. So even people that actually do sins now, and worse, that's the sinners of Israel. So even though that person might be, to some extent, cut off from their chokhmah, they might be, if not dead, let's call it, your limb is asleep, you've been sitting too long and you can't feel your leg anymore. It's that kind of a connection to their spark of chokhmah. They're only in that case before they're put to the test, as we've learned historically, of what he's calling sanctifying God's name, which means throughout history, as we talked about, people have come to Jewish people and said, bow down to this whatever, or I'll kill you, or eat this, or sleep with this person that's outside of your marriage, or I'll kill you, whatever it is. There's certain situations where it's not just, I can't pretend that this isn't going to affect me. I know in my core, this is going to cut me off from my soul, from my connection to Ein Sof, and that will ignite that spark of Chokhmah. And even though for the past 20, 40, 60 years, I might have just been going along kind of self-centered and not really caring that much about it deeply, that spark of Chokhmah is still active, and when it's challenged, when someone puts me to a test that actually impinges on that Chokhmah's connection to the Ein Sof, now suddenly there's no question in my mind I'll even give it my life. When yesterday I slept in and didn't come to synagogue, right? Why did I do that yesterday? That didn't seem to me like it would really affect my spark of Chokhmah, right? That I'll come to temple tomorrow. I won't come today. I'll just sleep in, right? I can tell that to myself. I can rationalize it, and the spark of Chokhmah can stay dormant, as it were. כי בחינת החוכמה שבנפש אלוקית, אם ניצוץ אלוקות מאור אינסוף ברוך הוא המלובש בו. Where we at for the...
Mary Jane?
Me? Oh, so sorry. For the faculty of Kokma, is that where we are?
Yeah.
All right, for the faculty of Kokma in the divine soul with the spark of godliness from the light of the blessed Ein Sof that is clothed in it.
הם בחינת גלות שגופם בנפש הבעמית מצד הקליפה שבחלל השמאלי שבלב, המולכת ומושלת בגופם.
Are in the state of exile in their body within the animal soul of the realm of Kalipa, in the left part of the heart, which reigns over them and dominates their body and rules over them.
Right, so there's something called exile, right? Exile, which means if I'm in exile, I'm not in my own territory. Right? So when I'm in my own land, I control my own destiny. I make my own laws. I can decide what I'm going to do. I'm in charge, right? Now when I'm in exile, and we see it historically with the Jewish people, we were put into exile, and then in many situations, we were very much at the mercy of where we lived in terms of how we could live and what we could do and how we could work. When you're in exile, now you're not in control. You're under somebody else's control. So that spark of chokhmah that we're going to learn how to harness in this path of meditation, it's always there. It's always connected to the Ein Sof, and it always has a love and a fear that is so powerful that it would cause me to give up my life rather than deny it. And yet, in the way it flows into consciousness, thought, or intellect, emotion, thought, speech, and action, the way that it infuses my consciousness, once it's there, now it can be in a state of exile. And what does that mean? It means my animal soul is running the ship, right? The energy, the life force that's coming from that spark of chokhmah, now when it flows into Bina, and Bina says, yeah, I'd rather take my life force today and sleep in, or this person needs my help, but, I got something else to do, and, I should say the truth, but I'd rather say something else. So whatever my thought, speech, and action expresses, that's nefesh b'amit, where's that life force coming from? It's coming from that spark of chokhmah. And that spark of chokhmah is now descending into my consciousness, but it's being held captive by my animal soul, and my animal soul is using that energy for its own purposes. It's even though that spark of chokhmah is so powerful that in certain situations I would give up my life rather than deny it, when it comes to regular day-to-day existence, it can actually be exiled in my animal soul's thought, speech, and action.
These are for the sinners of Israel?
It's everybody. I mean,
Everybody.
it's most people, yeah. Like if you've ever done something you regret, if you ever done something wrong, if you don't spend your whole day, helping other people or learning Torah or praying or, if you're a normal person, then your animal soul is active. And where is that light, that life coming from? It's coming from the Chokhmah, the divine soul. So he was teaching, many great kabbalistic and Hasidic masters that came to him to learn, but were already functioning at a very high state, and their whole life was focused on improving themselves and trying to become a tzaddik and encountering the Ein Sof and whatnot. So, when he's talking to them, there may have been some that this didn't so much apply to, but as the Tanya applies to just normal people like us, everyone can certainly learn from this. Besod galut hashchina kaniskar la'el.
This exile of the faculty of Chokhmah, while the animal soul dominates the body, echoes the esoteric doctrine of the exile of the Shekhinah, since the Ein Sof abides in Chokhmah, as mentioned earlier.
So just like my own spark of consciousness can be exiled within my actual intellect, emotions, thought, speech, and action, same thing happens to the cosmos. The Shekhinah, God's presence, which the world flows out of, although God is speaking the world into existence at every moment, as we've learned in past texts, that energy of God's speech and God's creative power, once it enters the world, now we have free will and we can do what we want with it. So the world can be at war and polluting and degraded, and yet it's the Shekhinah that's there that is speaking the world into existence, right? So how is the Shekhinah telling a story, and then that story takes over and does the opposite of what the Shekhinah wants? It's a mystery, right? You'd think if I was telling a story, I could control exactly what was going on in the story. The story wouldn't take over my voice and cause me to tell some other story. But Malchut of Atzilus, what we call divine speech, that energy that actually brings the world into existence at every moment, that gives the world free will, or at least humans, and now the world can take that Shekhinah, that divine presence, and actually exile it in whatever our nonsense might be this year, right? So we're a little microcosm of that. The same way my chokhmah, my spark of holiness, can be exiled in my own consciousness if I let my animal soul run the show. Same thing can happen in the cosmos. There was an interesting parallel that one of the people I watch online to help with this class told to try and explain this, and that was that once a chassid came to the Alter Rebbe, who wrote this book, and he said, I don't feel like doing it anymore. Like I wake up and I do mitzvahs and I study Torah and I live a good life, but just I don't want to. Like I'm forcing myself, and there's no joy and love and fear. And the Alter Rebbe said, there's a story in Elisha in the Tanakh where a woman came to Elisha whose husband had borrowed so much money and then died that she was left with all this debt. And her debtors were coming now to take her 2 children and slaves. So she came to the prophet Elisha and said, what can I do? I have no money. My husband has passed away. I'm a widow, and he borrowed so much money. And by the way, he borrowed it to save a whole bunch of prophets. He borrowed it for a good reason, but now here she is in debt. What do I do? And Elisha said, well, what do you have in your house? She said, I have nothing. I'm destitute. Like all I have is a tiny little jug of oil left, and everything else we've sold. There's nothing to do. I said, that's good. Here's what I want you to do. Go to your neighbors and just borrow as many empty vessels as you can. Like big, small, whatever. Just fill your house up with as many borrowed vessels as you can. And then take your jug of oil and start pouring into those vessels. So she went and she found the biggest container she could find from all her neighbors till her house was just full of these large and small containers. Then she started pouring the oil, and this prophetic story, that tiny jug of oil filled all these containers. You can imagine, big tubs and drums of now precious oil filled them all. And then Elisha said, now go sell this oil, and you'll not only pay off the debt, you'll have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. So the Alter Rebbe said to this person who came to him, that jug of oil, that little jug of oil, that's your chokhmah. Right? No matter what else has happened in your life, that's always there, that's always alive, and it's always an endless supply of energy. But what are these empty vessels from the story of Elisha? Those are the Jewish valuable actions we have in the world. We call mitzvahs, or Torah study, right? Which are all over, right? Especially in the high holidays, right? I mean, there's so many things we could do. Or Shabbat here at Temple Israel, or coming and feeding people at our soup kitchen. So fill your house with these mitzvahs. Don't worry if they're full or not, even if they're empty. Just fill your house with these mitzvahs. Do more and more of them. And then pour that spark of chokhmah into those mitzvahs, and you'll see it will fill all of them with life. And then what will happen? You'll have your 2 children back. And who are the 2 children? As we've learned, the emotions are children of the intellect, and the emotions are love and fear, love and awe, call them. So these 2 children that someone's trying to take away into slavery, where I'm going to love just physical stuff, or I'm going to have respect only for money or whatever. Now I'm going to have those children back, and I can have love and awe for deeper, important things in life, whether it's family or learning, whatever you want. But we know these Jewish things that we want to have love and awe for. So that's the spark of chokhmah. No matter where we're at, no matter how empty we feel our house has become, and no matter how in danger my emotional life may be, we always have this little jug of oil, and we can always just collect all these mitzvahs and start pouring. And that spark of chokhmah will really change so much. Top of 272. How are we doing for time? How do we fit so much into that short time? Yeah, let's get to 4th of Shvat.
Yeah, we can do that last paragraph.
For this reason, thank you. ולכן נקראת אהבה זו בנפש אלוקית, שרצונו וחפצה להידבק בשם חיי חיים ברוך הוא בשם אהבה המסותרת.
This reason, this love found in the divine soul, whose wish and desire is to unite with God, fountainhead of all life, is called hidden love. An apparent contradiction in terms. Love denotes a manifest emotion and is not at all hidden. It is called hidden only when it is obstructed by an alien entity, and not because of any inherent quality of concealment, as the Alter Rebbe goes on to say.
Right, so we shouldn't be surprised that we have this tremendous source of love that is there waiting to be harnessed, but that it may be hidden, even to us. Just like I may have forgotten about a song that I heard when I was a kid, but I hear it and it brings back all these memories, right? Many of us may have lived our adult life never fully encountering the power of the emotions that flow out of this spark of Chokhmah, and it's just not in our consciousness. But it doesn't mean it's not there. It's hidden, and there are techniques to actually ignite it and harness it in perfectly safe ways. That was a joke. V'hu ki hi mesuteret u'mechusa bilvush sak deklipa b'foshe Yisrael.
For it is hidden and veiled in the case of the transgressors of Israel, in the sackcloth of the klipa.
And so here we have a more specific image, not just that it's hidden, but it's hidden in what? Sackcloth, right? So we know klipa is the externality of the world, the superficial aspect of the world. I look at a person and I might say, oh, they're just a physical form, and that's all they are. But of course, I know there's intellect, there's emotions, there's a soul, there's so much more, and I can't reduce a person to just their physical form, right? I mean, we see that from TV and the modeling industry, that their value is really just their physical form, but we know there's so much more. We don't want to stop at the superficial. Klipa means shell, literally means shell.
Shell?
Yeah, so when we have a fruit, it has a peel and then has an inside. The peel I take off and discard, and then the fruit is what I eat, right? So when I encounter life, I don't want to just live with the klipa, the shell. I want to actually get past the shell and encounter the inside, right? So in relationships in particular, you know, I meet somebody and I think, what can I get out of them? How can they help me? You know, what's the superficial nature of this relationship? That's the shell. But I think, who is this person inside? How can we learn from each other? You know, what does our relationship mean on its profound level? Now I'm getting past the klipa to the essence of the thing. And so that relates to every phenomenon has a shell and it has an essence. And in this case, that spark of chokhmah is not just hidden in the klipa, but hidden in what's called sackcloth. And sackcloth is traditionally worn when? When do you ever hear about mourning, right? So it's not just that it's hidden in something neutral, it's actually in a state of mourning. That spark of chokhmah, it's in every intellectual flow, every emotion, every thought, speech, and action that I have. It's powering it, and yet it's wearing that consciousness and that action the same way a mourner would wear sackcloth. Obviously unhappy in a state of exile, not happy that it's providing life to emotions of the animal soul. Right? So we don't want that. וממנה נכנס בהם רוח שטוס, לחטוא כמאמר רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, אין אדם חוטא כולו.
From the Khalifa there enters into them a spirit of folly, which leads them to sin, as our sages remark. A person does not sin unless a spirit of folly enters into him.
All right, so let's stop there with the text, but this is kind of like, you know, how sometimes we all approach anything having to do with health, right? Whether it's eating or smoking or drinking or exercise, you name it, right? Many people will live their lives, even though they intellectually know the studies, if I exercise, it's going to improve all this stuff in health, and if I eat these foods, it will improve. If I eat these foods, it will not improve. It'll do the opposite, God forbid. And if I live a life without stress, then it's going to be... So we know this information, and yet day in, day out, how many of us will do things that clearly, intellectually, has been proven are actually affecting our health and could even, God forbid, cause terrible things, right? And yet we do it day in, day out, right? And yet, if I'm sitting at a meal and, God forbid, something gets lodged in my throat and I can't breathe, Now, nothing else matters, right? I would give up anything. I would stop anything. I was sitting at that meal. Maybe I was skipping my exercise class and I was eating fried foods and there was somebody smoking at the table next to me. And I was very happily sitting there doing all this stuff that actually threatened my life, believe it or not, intellectually. I'm fine with it. I'm going to do fine. It's great, right? And yet, that lump of whatever, God forbid, is stuck in my throat. Now, forget everything. Like, all that matters is getting it out. Why? Because there's a difference between something that threatens my life in an abstract way, although real, but abstract, versus something that really just pokes at it, A mosquito lands on my shoulder when I'm sleeping, I'll probably not notice it, or when I'm talking. A mosquito lands on my shoulder, I might not notice it, and off it goes. A mosquito lands in my eye, right? Suddenly, that triggers something. My eye, I can't ignore. That now suddenly all my instincts are focused on get that thing out of my eye. Same thing with the windpipe, with the breath. I know if that thing is in my windpipe and I can't breathe, that's it. Life won't continue. I'm separated from my physical source of life. Yeah, was I sitting at that meal threatening my source of life with all my actions? Yeah, but you know what? That's it's one day. Maybe it adds up, maybe it doesn't. We'll see, right? This is like that for my soul. Once we encounter one of these situations, and you don't have to encounter the situation to use this technique, but this is the understanding. Once a person who may have lived their whole life in one direction encounters that challenge to their connection to God, which historically has been something like, bow down to this cross or I will X, Y, Z. Now suddenly it's like something landed in my eye or like something's in my windpipe. Nothing else matters. I cannot separate myself from my spark of Chokhmah, and I would even give up my life. I'd give up anything. And that power is available to us to use in a normal way, day-to-day life, to get through any situation in as high-functioning a state as we would like. Make sense? We got 5 minutes? So we've been doing the previous system meditation we learned, which involves clearing the mind and then introducing a divine concept. So I'm not sure that the video thing has come up on the videos. When I checked, it wasn't. So let's use the whiteboard. So 3 letters. Aleph, Chet. Oh, that's not Chet, right? Oh, that is, yeah. And then Dalet, which is 1, 8, 4. So the meditation is when you're saying the Shema, when you get to the word Echad, and you can say it as long as you want, you fill your mind with the concept. The Aleph means there's one God, just Ein Sof, that's all there is, in the 7 heavens and the earth. So that's what 8, Chet means 8, and Dalet is the 4 directions. So any physical direction, north, south, east, west, wherever I go in the physical world, there's just this one God. So one God in any spiritual or conscious experience in any direction. And by clearing our mind, introducing this divine concept, we generate emotions that then we can use to elevate ourselves and elevate the world. And now I'm blocking your view of it if you're watching. I hope that's better. And just find yourself in a comfortable seat. Take a moment to scan your body for any sources of any non-relaxed places. Let's get them to open and lengthen and relax. Let your breath even out. Lengthen slightly until perhaps about a count of 4 for each in-breath. Another count of 4 as that in-breath is held in. Another count of 4 as you breathe out. Another count of 4 as that out-breath remains out. Then in again. 2, 3, 4. Remaining there. And back out. 2, 3, 4. Remaining there. Let that pattern continue for a few cycles. as you're breathing, focus on the spot just under your nostrils, on your upper lip. And in particular, as you're breathing, focus on the difference in temperature between the air coming in and the air leaving. So on the in-breath, cool air flowing in. And then the out-breath, warmer air flowing out over that spot, your upper lip. And if you're at home, you can remain in this stage for a few minutes if you like, and then turn the video back on. At this point, we're going to open our wisdom gateway. This is the gateway for the spark of Chokhmah. In this practice, the wisdom gateway is the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. So that pause, that about 4-beat pause between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath, that is my wisdom gateway, and just try and remain there, as it were, for the duration of the rest of the breathing cycle.